Chapter 21. Seasons had passed since Avalon defected from the Black Rabbits, and Veda had not been heard from in just as long. In those months, Ellicott had grown into a formidable assassin, and the grisly memories of slaying his friends slowly faded from his mind. No one realized this transformation more than Legion. Ellicott entered the Highblade's quarters and kneeled before his master. "You wish to see me?" Legion sipped tea from a clay cup. He smiled fondly as the warm cup rested in his hand. Winter had been unreasonably harsh this year. Winds howled outside as flurries packed onto the once dirt pathways. Legion watched as Ellicard brushed off drifts of snow from his shoulders and mask. He nodded and gestured for Ellicard to fill a cup for himself when he caught his student eyeing the kettle with yearning eyes. "Ellicard, winter will pass next month. By then we expect to have a new branch of recruits. This will also mark the beginning of a new division." Ellicard hastily poured himself a cup of tea, shivering and wet from the snow. He took a long sip before finally responding. "I've heard rumors that we will be pairing medics with our assassins on missions. I doubt they will be of any use when they are neck-deep in danger." Legion nodded. "This is true, which is why this division will be a new breed of rabbit. Veiled Menders. We will be training them in stealth as well as in a bit of combat. In the future, assassins will work alongside Veiled Menders." Legion gestured to Ellicard's right arm. "Too many missions would have gone a lot smoother had a medic been present." Ellicard looked pained, remembering the battle he lost against the White Cloak. He quickly redirected the conversation. "Master, why have you really called me? I don't believe you called me here because you dearly missed my company." Legion smiled. He found it endearing that Ellicard still referred to him as master. These days, he had seen less and less of his former student. His role as Highblade had kept him busy and prevented him from doing many missions, so his time with Ellicard was usually brief, but always time he considered well spent. "I wish for you to be by my side when the new recruits come in. I was wondering if you had given any thought to becoming a teacher." Ellicard looked up from his drink. "Master, I don't think I'm prepared to teach. I still consider myself a student." Legion shook his head. "You underestimate yourself, my student. You have gained much cunning and prowess over these last few seasons. Despite your lack of experience, you are able to stand toe-to-toe with many of the veterans here. I would urge you to think about taking at least one student under your wing. You still have much to give to this clan." Ellicard listened to each word and imagined himself as Ridge, Baines, or even Legion, a student of his own. It might be a good move for him. "I'll think about it. That's all I ask," said Legion. An old wagon that had seen its fair share of use pulled into the Black Rabbit retreat. In it sat children of varied ages and genders. The rabbits driving it ushered them all out of the cart and then filed into a single line. Ellicard and Legion stood off to the side, watching as several men gave the recruits the same frightening speech and direction that Ellicard had heard when he first arrived. That his old life was over. A new one was to begin. Quitting meant death. Escaping meant death. Failure meant death. He smirked in amusement. One newcomer in particular seemed to have already caused the instructors much grief. He was a teenager, Ellicard's age. He had gray skin and long, deep purple hair. He wore a porcelain clown mask that hid his silver eyes. "Remove your mask, elf," an instructor demanded. "It is a memento of my true home," the teenager said, speaking in a quiet voice. The instructor sneered and went to snatch the mask. However, the disobedient elf slammed his head into the instructor's face. The thrust crushed the instructor's nose and impaled his cheeks and eyes with shards of porcelain. He cried in agony as he fell to his knees. Immediately, several other instructors brought their blades to the boy's throat. "Enough!" A command pierced through the commotion. It came from the High Blade. Legion turned to Ellicard. "This one could use guidance, Ellicard. He has the spirit of a wild horse." Ellicard stared intensely at the elf, but shook his head. "I'm not the one that will break that horse." Legion put a hand on Ellicard's shoulder. "My student, you don't break a wild horse. You forge a connection with them. A horse that chooses to bear your weight is far greater ally than one that is forced to." Ellicard raised his head and looked into Legion's eyes with a satisfied grin. "I suppose so." Legion turned back to all the rabbits, still poised to strike down the elf. Let him be. He will be instructed by Alucard. Medics, take your recruits to the new Veiled Mender Division grounds. Several teenage elves were ushered by Alucard and Legion, but one confused elven maiden caught Alucard's eye. Her eyes widened with surprise when Alucard met her gaze. Jetta? Alucard said, utterly perplexed. Before she could respond, she was rushed away by a medic. Alucard quickly turned back to Legion and asked, Master, was that Jetta? Legion raised an eyebrow. Who? Jetta Breezelark, my old childhood friend from Ravenshore. Calm down, Alucard. We use your old village as a recruitment point every now and then. This time we recruited potential members for the new Combat Medic Division. Does she have any medical experience? Her grandmother owned an apothecary, so she will have been taught the basics of medicine. That knowledge will be very valuable for her, Legion said, trying to walk away. Alucard shook his head in disbelief. Legion pointed at the gray-skinned elf. Concentrate, young master. Your student is him, not Jetta. Jetta will be a veiled mender. She'll learn quickly and serve you well. Or she'll fail and die. Legion put his hands heavily on Alucard's shoulders. That too could be the case. But you need to trust that Jetta will do her job so that you can do yours. Legion waited for his former student to nod. Now get to work. Alucard nodded as Legion disappeared into his quarters. Taking a deep breath, Alucard walked over to his new student. Elves don't usually come in gray around here. Where do you hail from? The elf was silent, curiously peering into Alucard's magenta eyes. I saved you from a slit throat. I'm not your enemy. My name is Alucard. I'm originally from a fishing village a few days north of Lost Dawns called Ravenshore. Lost Dawns? My troupe performed there before the Winter Moon Festival, said the elf, pleased to make some friendly conversation. Alucard smiled. You're from a circus? The elf smirked. Assassin Alucard, I was once masked, but I no longer am. I think it would be fair if we stood on equal footing before I divulge any further information about myself. Alucard smiled underneath his own mask. That's not how this works. I am the master, you are the student. We are not equals. The gray elf bowed down in an exaggerated motion. But of course, master. After all, I am merely a wild horse. You are not to break me, but to make me your ally. Feed me a carrot, and I will allow you to saddle me. Alucard smiled and decided to play along. He lowered the mask that covered his mouth and nose, and then lowered his hood. The student smiled thinly at the sight of such a handsome young face. A handsome young face such as yours should not be hidden from the world. Now that neither of us are hiding anything, I can trust you. I was born and raised in my family's troupe, the Ebonpath Traveling Circus. My family couldn't afford the protection that the Black Rabbits offered while we traveled across Long Whisper, so, to avoid repercussions, I was offered in return. Ravenshore, as well as other villages, offers recruits in exchange for protection. What is your name? Alucard asked, knowing the story all too well. Inlay Ebonpath, the elf said, still staring dreamily into Alucard's eyes. Well, Inlay, I know nothing about the life of a circus performer, but I can tell you that the new life before you is fulfilling. It will be hard at times, but if you persevere, you will find servitude to Alana rewarding. I will teach you skills of stealth and combat, politics and philosophy. You'll see the world in a new light, the light of shadow and truth. Are you prepared to undertake the challenge? Inlay thinly smiled. What choice do I have? Alucard paused. I will give you a choice never offered to me or any other rabbit. If you do not wish to serve as the rabbit, you may go back to your life as a clown. But know this, there is no feeling in any realm, mortal or roaming, quite like the feeling of committing yourself to something greater than yourself. You will become more than an assassin or a servant of Alana. Inlay looked at the woods behind him. He didn't know his way back to his troupe, but that really didn't concern him. At the moment, Alucard's words intrigued him. He never thought of a life outside of his troupe was possible, and though he had traveled the world, he felt that there was always something missing in his life. Perhaps Alucard's life offered him that missing piece. Inlay looked back to Ellicard, interested in hearing the rest of Ellicard's thought. What will I become? A black rabbit. Inlay chuckled. Another troupe, another performance. This time as a rogue instead of a clown. Yes, but this time you'll juggle with life and death instead of balls and pins. Inlay's eyes lit up. Well then, Master Ellicard, show me the world of the Black Rabbits. Chapter 22. Alu, please whisper in my ear. Guard me from the wicked in this world. In your grace I shall find no fear. Your mercy is my shield. Your love is my sword. Don't let him die, Mender. A voice broke out as Jetta tried desperately to triage the wounds of the dying man before her. Her hands were a clumsy, shaky mess. She prayed again, harder. Alu, please whisper in my ear. Guard me from the wicked of this world. In your grace I shall find no fear. Your mercy is my shield. Your love is my sword. His life is in your hands. Your incompetence is killing him. The voice lashed out again. The dying man did not flinch or cry out in agony as she weaved the needle in and out of his raw flesh. He just lay there, a bloody, motionless heap. A deeper, more severe panic began to set in on Jenna, and she desperately tried to mend the broken body before her. Alu, please whisper in my ear. He's dead. Tyrek stood across from Jetta with his arms folded and a disgusted look scrawled across his face. Jetta folded forward in agony and wept, her eyes hot with tears. Her hands were drenched in blood. She slowly lifted a blood-soaked gauze from a gaping puncture wound under the ribs of the corpse in front of her. Not everyone can be saved. You must come to terms with this. The medic's voice was emotionless. He gestured to the other medics to come and carry the corpse away. They swiftly moved forward and lifted the body. One medic lifted it by its arms, the other by the legs. Jetta was mortified at her abject failure. Her mind raced. What could I have done differently? A million different scenarios played out in her head at once, and she found respite in none of them. Then, a dark anger rose up inside of her. There was nothing I could do, was there? Her voice did not even thinly veil her fury and disgust. She looked up from her bloody, quivering hands. Why would you purposefully kill this man? To teach me some petty lesson? The instructor shrugged off her reproach and placed a hand on Jetta's shoulder. He was a criminal, a no-name vagabond. His life did not matter until he was used for this lesson. We gave him a purpose to fulfill. Do you weep when you tug a weed from the flower bed? No, Jenna hotly replied and wiped the warm tears from her face. Then you do not have to weep now. Tyrek passed a warm washcloth to the student. Clean yourself up. In the future, you'll see weeds be pulled, and their deaths will allow flowers blossom. Weep when you must. Otherwise, make sure that above all else, you did your job. Jetta took the towel and walked away, shaken and angry from the ordeal. Alu, where are you? Jetta rested under a large gnarled tree. Its branches were dotted with tiny flower buds, and a crisp early spring breeze waved the leaves in a slight rocking motion. She held a medallion in her hands. Its silver-linked chain was wrapped around her wrist and locked her hands together. Her eyes were shut in concentration as she whispered a set of prayers in a now-forgotten tongue. Speak to me, O angel of mine, and let the sun upon me shine. Take me to your world above. Fill my heart with mercy, grace, and love. Chase away the wings like shadows, and call me in your gentle meadow. The shadow of a figure broke her focus. The angelic tongue. Your dialect is a bit off, but I can tell you were educated. You are no normal fishing village girl. Master Jezovic, I thought I was alone, Jetta said, slightly taken aback by her medical instructor's presence. Jezovic was an elf like she was. His hair was silver and tied in a long braid that fell down his back. He wore the traditional gray and deep purple robes of a black rabbit medic. He was revered as a medic by the Black Rabbits, but was classically trained. New medics or menders were now expected to also be present on combat missions. Jetta, you and your peers were given this time off to hone your skills. Yet, I find you here praying instead. Jetta draped her necklace hastily around her neck, and tucked the medallion into her tunic. Jezevek took notice of the symbol. "That is not this emblem of Alana," he said with an air of suspicion and disappointment. Jeddah attempted to stand and walk away before the conversation turned troublesome. "You are right, master. I should go practice my craft." He grabbed her by the arm. "You'd be wise to aim your prayers towards Alana. The goddess of mercy cannot help you here." Jeddah eyed the darkness in her master's eyes. "Alu protects me. I shall not fail her." "Your prayers fall on deaf ears, child. Only Alana listens to a rabbit," Jezevik whispered harshly. "I tend to rabbits, but I am not one of them." Jeddah spat, now seething with anger. She could not hide her frustration with her situation. Her master's words hung heavy on her heart. The last few weeks had been an era of darkness in her otherwise enlightened life. A year prior, she had been given the opportunity to travel the world with a priest of Alu, but chose to stay with what was left of her family. Now she did not even have that. She had nothing anymore but her faith. "Don't say such ridiculous things, Jeddah. We are not your enemies. Your enemy is your own doubt. Doubt in yourself and your future. This is your new life. We are your new family, and Alana is your new god." New life, new family, new god. The impact of this reality hit her like a heavy oak club to the gut. She stumbled back against the rowan tree, her face scrunched up in anguish. She stammered as she attempted to collect the revelation. "I cannot go home. I'm stuck here forever. My family, friends, village. Alu, why have you forsaken me?" Jezevik lifted her chin to expose her teary eyes. "Jeddah, the quicker you leave your past behind, the faster you can go on to living your new one. Alu may have abandoned you, but Alana will always embrace you in her wings." "I want to speak to Ellicott. Where can I find him?" "An old friend from your village?" And here we all thought he severed the ribbon of his past. Jezevik smiled. "It will do you some good to speak to a friend that has been where you stand. I will arrange some time for you to spend with him." "Thank you, master," she said calmly. Ellicott found Jeddah waiting on a small wooden bridge that spanned across a brook. Jeddah smiled as her old childhood friend approached her. "Ellicott, it's been so long. I've nearly forgotten what you looked like. This bridge isn't exactly the old willow tree, but it'll have to do." Ellicott did not break a grin. His eyes were vacant compared to Jeddah's, which were still full of life. Jeddah's smile vanished in his cold presence. "Ellicott, what's wrong? You and I are reunited, friends forever, just like it's supposed to be." Ellicott cupped her hands and gave her a faint, hollow smile. "Jeddah, things are never going to be like they used to be. The life we had as children is frozen in time, far in the past." Jeddah's eyes swelled up. "Ellicott, not you too." "Jeddah, time stands still when you're a kid. You hold on to meaningless things, but when you grow up, when you mature, you have to let go and learn what is truly important." "Meaningless things? Like our friendship? Like the promise you made me?" she shouted, flustered by the fact that everything she held close was now escaping her like a withered leaf breaking apart in the wind. "Jeddah, Jezevek tells me you are having trouble adjusting to your new home," Ellicott said, ignoring Jeddah's questions. "Ellicott, you are all that's left of... Jeddah stuttered, trying to keep her composure. "I'm here, Jeddah. But I'm different now. I had to let go of the weak-willed child that I was. I had to let go of silly dreams. I had to let it all go in order to survive." Jeddah collapsed into his arms and sobbed. She did not want it to change, but she knew her old life would soon be just as dead as the man she could not save. The rabbits had cut and stabbed it and left it for her to mend, and she knew already that doing so was an impossible task. No one was better at killing than the rabbits. "Jeddah, you need to embrace your new lifestyle. This new world wants to chew you up and spit you out. It's a harsh, bleak world. It will shove you and kick you when you're down. You need to take in what the clan teaches you. The rabbits don't want you to fail, but will discard you if you do. Please, listen to me. I've seen what happens when you don't adapt, firsthand. Ellicard hung on to those last words, reflecting on the night in the cave. They both fell to their knees. Jetta's crying slowly stopped. Ellicard, will you be there for me if I fall? Or will you be the one kicking me down? Jetta, I serve the rabbits now. If you become a rabbit, I'll protect you. But I can't stand by you if you defy us. Forgive me, Jetta, this is my life now. Ellicard brushed her aside as she still shivered. He walked away, hoping he got through to her. She sat alone on the bridge until the sun went down and contemplated the choice before her. Fight or submit. Chapter 23. Inlay strained to move his arm to block the incoming attack. The weights on his wrists slowed him down considerably, and his body could no longer exert the energy to keep up with Ellicard's quick and graceful movements. A spinning butterfly kick connected with Inlay's jaw, and he twirled chaotically to the ground. Inlay lay motionless, struggling to find the will to stand again. The two rabbits had been sparring for at least 3 hours. Inlay's wrists, shoulders, and ankles bore heavy weights that hindered his otherwise naturally agile movements. Ellicard, however, was free of such a handicap. Inlay slowly rose to a knee, and then managed to stand. Exhausted, battered, and bruised from the bout, he did not know how much longer he could press on. His vision was blurred from a swollen eye, and his eyes stung from the sweat that dripped into them. Every inch of his body ached. Even all his years and as an acrobat in the circus could not prepare him for such excruciating work. But he loved every second of it. Ellicard floated from toe to toe. He danced around Inlay's worn and pathetic defenses before landing a series of jabs to Inlay's kidneys and a devastating haymaker to the side of Inlay's face. The blow sent a mixture of saliva and blood whipping from the shadow elf's mouth. Inlay's entire world crashed sideways as he slammed into the hard, frozen ground. Enough. Rest, Ellicard said before removing his tunic. His toned muscles glistened from the sweat that beaded down his body. Inlay watched entranced. Ellicard was a young, attractive elf, even with the scars that crossed over his back and chest. It made Inlay's heart skip a beat as he watched the infatuation. Since the moment Ellicard stepped in front of Inlay and removed his mask, every movement, every exchange, every moment, Ellicard was locked in Inlay's heart. Ellicard tossed a waterskin to a student. Hot day today. You're starting to give me a workout. Inlay smiled, struggling to grab the waterskin that fell just shy of his reach. Even stretching his arm was a feat for Inlay. He rolled to his back as he poured the reward down his throat. Easy, Inlay, don't hurt yourself. Inlay nearly passed out from pain as he burst out laughing. Master, you'd make a good clown. You have a knack for comedic timing. Ellicard sat down next to his apprentice, cracking a smile when he realized where the joke came from. What was it like entertaining a crowd in Lost Dawns? Inlay sat up, reminiscing about life as an entertainer. The Ebon Path Traveling Circus. It consisted of his parents, 3 uncles, and 7 sisters. He was the youngest of them all. They were a close family, which made it harder when the Black Rabbits took him. However, life in the circus, as adventurous as it seemed, slowly became monotonous. The same routines, the same laughs, the same gasps. The only thing that changed from performance to performance was the city they were in. Inlay? Ellicard poked, seeing his student lost in thought. Lost Dawns is a grand city. I've never seen a tree so big. The people are a traditional crowd. They laugh and cheer when cued like marionettes. If you know which string to pull, they'll do whatever you want. You didn't like being a clown? Ellicard asked curiously. I grew bored of it. It's nothing like being an assassin. I can feel my body tightening, growing stronger. I'm reaching a new level. What's more, I'm making more of a difference now than I was delivering trite punchlines. Ellicard took back the waterskin and took a sip. He fell silent for a moment, or two, before speaking quietly, half mumbling to himself. I wish Jetta had your fortitude. Jetta? An old friend from my village. My only real friend. She counted on me for anything, but then I became a rabbit. Ellicard drifted for a moment, remembering the promise he had made to her. How he had said he would always be there for her. How he would be the brother she did not have. She was recruited, wasn't she? Well, she must be somewhere around here training, then. Inlay pressed his hand to his forehead and pretended to search high and low for her. Ellicard laughed and released a distant sigh. She doesn't really understand the good we do here. She's fighting every step of the way, and she's going to suffer because of it. Have you seen her yet? Since she arrived? Yesterday. Inlay nodded, slowly seeing the picture that Ellicard was painting of Jeddah. It comes down to you not giving up on her. Now, more than ever, she needs you. The Black Rabbits aren't going to salvage her. You need to. You want her to survive? Well, then you have to be there with her. You must think of her as your Blade Sister. I see that now. You're wise beyond your years, Inlay. Inlay winced as he let out a meek, bloody smile. Inlay, the Blood Forest comes in less than 2 months. Veiled Menders will be assigned to each group. I'm going to arrange that you be paired up with Jeddah. Inlay nodded quickly. Say no more, Master. If she can keep me alive, I'll make sure she makes it out of that forest. Ellicard jumped up and grabbed Inlay's hand, lifting him to his feet. Well then, we better make sure you're ready. How about another round? Chapter 24. Inlay's polished blade moved silently and smoothly through the pale moonlight beneath the canopy. The would-be assassin choked as he retched a stream of blood onto the cool, dark forest floor. Inlay's new steel mask gleamed under a ray of moonlight, spotted with streaks of blood. He thought back to the day that Ellicard had given him his new mask as he slowly dragged 2 fingers through the warm, sticky blood that had spattered on it. Inlay, your old mask represents the family and life you once had. It is for the best that it was broken. However, I want to give you a new symbol of the life you have now, of the family that surrounds you. Together, we will make you a stronger person. Inlay stood motionless with his eyes closed and breathed softly. His jet-black leather armor would have been spotless had it not been for several small, white arcs of blood that had sprayed across his torso. He breathed a quick sigh, shaking away the memories, then cleaned the blood from his blade. He needed to be precise. The Blood Forest was not his only test. He was tasked, like many others in the forest, to protect a veiled mender. He, however, had the added weight of having to protect the childhood friend of his mentor, and Jeddah was making this no easy task. Jeddah? We must move quicker. I hear another pair not far from the east. Inlay wanted to keep Jeddah safe, but also reveled in the idea of spilling more blood beneath the dark, dimly lit canopy. Jeddah knew this, and took little to no comfort in it. We could make our way quicker if you would quit killing everybody who had misfortune of crossing our paths, Jeddah said with slightly more reproach in her voice than she had intended. This is supposed to mirror a real-world escort mission, not a siege. Her voice carried less edge this time. It was almost soft. Inlay grinned wickedly beneath his mask. She made a fair point. He had been going slightly out of his way to kill off the competition. Ellicard had regaled him with stories of the Blood Forest for the past couple of months. Ellicard had told him how he was originally sickened by the thought of taking a life, but Inlay felt nothing inside when he took a life. In fact, apart from his strong feelings for Ellicard, he was almost completely empty inside. He did revel in his role as one of Alana's harbingers of death. The power that came with ending a life and the notion each death could tip the scales of balance in the world. It thrilled him. Although Jeddah's new life had left her numb and unfazed at the sight of death, she would have preferred to be fighting to preserve life. In her eyes, even the death of a rabbit seemed a great waste. She had trained countless long hours to keep death at bay, and yet here she was, surrounded by it. Even so, she seemed to slip into the role of a veiled mender naturally. Her hands were steady and quick with stitching and bandaging. She also worked exceedingly well under pressure. Yet, deep inside, she knew she was saving those who would go on to kill for a cause she did not believe in. Over time, Jeddah struggled less with her skills as a mender and more with identifying as a black rabbit. She had to pray to her goddess Alu in secret because praying to any god besides Alana was treasonous. To make matters worse, mercy was not an attribute praised by the rabbits. She remembered a common prayer that she was taught. Born of shadow, the light I'll face. My blade is silent, swift, and sleek. My dear Alana, give me grace, and I shall slay those I seek. A prayer that she noted even Ellicard would whisper before going out on a mission. She, however, could barely stomach such a vile hymn. A deity should not give their blessing for anyone to kill, especially for such nebulous reasons as the rabbits apparently had. She simply could not fathom such a god. Jetta whispered a prayer to clear her mind. Fill the wicked with purity. Find those who wander in the darkness. Alu will give the weak security and breathe life into the heartless. What was that, Jetta? Inlay called to her as he finished scouting up ahead. Come on, Inlay. Can we avoid any further bloodshed and just get out of here? This place gives me the creeps. I can't help but feel like we're always being watched. Jetta looked around nervously as they pushed ahead, but could see nothing behind the infinite black lurking beyond the trees. Inlay had to admit that the Blood Forest was the most unnatural forest he had never stepped foot in. The soil was as bathed in blood as the trees were in shadow. He appeared to be comfortable deep within the wretched forest, but in truth, he wanted nothing more than to put the forest's eeriness behind him. Fine, let's go. Ellicard stood high in the branches of the Blood Forest, keeping a watchful eye on a lone assassin stalking Jetta and Inlay. With each step that he made, Ellicard gripped the handle of his blade even tighter. Do not interfere with the test, he murmured to himself. He could sense the tension building within himself, and was worried that he would act rashly. Ellicard's eyes darted over his shoulder. A figure emerged from the thick shadows behind him. Ellicard loosened his grip. Master, I was only... Legion took Ellicard's hand and slowly peeled them from the blade. You were only keeping an eye on your student and your friend. You do not have to explain your actions to me. Legion walked the skulking assassin below and saw that he was quickly drawing closer to the two recruits. Nevertheless, we shouldn't be here. You know the rules as well as I. His name is Kier, Ellicard said, brushing off Legion's words. He's a student of Dest. As you can see, he excels in stealth and tracking. He chose not to be paired with a veiled mender, and now I see why. It's much easier to stalk alone. He has been following Inlay's trail of blood all night. Ellicard's eyes dashed wildly through the trees as he tried to keep Jetta and Inlay in his line of sight. Legion frowned slightly as his gaze followed the two students below. With each kill, Inlay has exerted more and more energy, and Jetta has apparently opted out of learning basic self-defense. Instead, she has honed her ability to mend her allies. But if Inlay keeps going at this pace... Legion looked up at Ellicard and saw a face that was tight with tension. Ellicard's face was as hard as stone, and a fierce protective anger seethed behind his eyes. The trio below dashed out of Ellicard's line of sight, so he jumped from tree to tree until he was looking down upon them once more. Kier was just upon Inlay and Jetta now. Legion landed beside a crouching Ellicard. He knew Ellicard's thoughts and motives well, and he knew that Ellicard was fighting a deep, fiery urge to interfere. Ellicard, you've done all you can for Inlay. You taught him our philosophies and sharpened his skills. Like yourself, Inlay must walk the Blood Forest and discover his own way out, and he must do it alone. Legion placed a firm hand on Ellicard's shoulder and turned to pull him away, but Ellicard did not move. Jetta did not have the luxury of our teachings. She is a lone sapling in the storm. Ellicard's words brought about a sudden flood of realization. Ellicard was not fighting to suppress his anger. He was fighting to suppress his fear. Fear that Jetta and Inlay would not have what it takes to survive the Blood Forest. No, fear that Jetta would not survive. Legion spoke softly. If she survives the storm, she'll grow into a tree that can survive any storm afterward. You must trust them, Ellicard. You look tired. Maybe we should rest. Jetta knew Inlay could probably keep the pace going for quite some time, but she was well and truly exhausted. The forest is silent. I think we're alone, Jetta said, kneeling down to take a swig from her water skin. Inlay crouched beside her, lifting his mask up from his mouth and panting heavily. Thanks. I could use a few minutes, he lied. He knew she needed a break, and that leaving her behind was not an option. Ellicard was fond of her, and so she was important to him. Jetta tossed him her water skin. Keep hydrated. The last thing we need is for you to pass out into the exit. Inlay caught the canteen, but seemed to stare intensely at Jetta. It was unsettling to her. Copper for your thoughts? Jetta asked timidly. I heard your prayer a little while ago. It was not a prayer of Alana. Why do you pray to her? Alu, you alienate yourself from your clan by worshipping a false goddess. Inlay pointed at his ear to show that her whispering had failed. Jetta was silent at first. She did not know what to say. Inlay was right. Right that she continued to alienate her peers and allies. They were villainous souls, but wayward nonetheless. They had good intentions, but were steered in the incorrect direction. If they focused their efforts for good, then she could only dream of what they would be capable of. Alu isn't false. She's very real, and if you opened yourself to her, you'd see she has sent me to help you. Inlay smirked. Well, you can help me by passing a ration, he said as he lifted the canteen mouth to his. However, only a droplet fell in. Inlay's eyes grew wide when he saw that a shuriken was lodged in its side and that water was pouring from the massive gash it left. Get down! He yelled as a volley of glinting iron shuriken flew in the night and sank deep into his arm. Jetta dropped to the leafy ground, her hands rising swiftly to protect her head. As more shurikens sliced wildly through the air, Inlay flipped backwards, attempting to dodge the flurry of iron. However, his exhausted body moved sluggishly. Several shuriken found their marks in the elf's thigh. Inlay crashed and skidded across the moss and fern. Inlay! Jetta cried as she slid to her partner's side. With a volley of shuriken flying by them, her hands dove into her haversack of medical supplies. Grabbing ointments and bandages, she examined the wounds that were in Inlay's arm and leg. Hold still. I'll get you patched up. Make it fast. I'll try to deflect any shuriken that I can. Inlay raised his blade and prepared to block any incoming attacks. I'll try. Keep that left arm and leg still. Inlay grimaced as Jetta worked fast, dislodging the star-shaped metal shards. She slapped a concoction of disinfectant and medicine into the wounds and wrapped them tightly with linen bandages. That'll have to do for now. Go, quickly. It'll do fine. Stand back. Inlay winced in pain as he began to gather himself for an attack. He drew his blade and peered into the darkness. If there was ever a time for him to be proud that he was a shadow elf, this was it. Accustomed to dark caves and tunnels, his eyes were likely more suited for low-light combat than his opponent. His attacker would not be safe in the shadows for long. Inlay scanned the mist of shadows that surrounded them, but saw nothing. The assailant was most likely hidden in the tall ferns that overran the forest. Come out. I wish to dance with you. A long moment passed, and nothing happened until the sound of movement stirred in the bush behind Inlay. Kier slowly stepped into the moonlight. His traditional black garbs had tight belts and sashes all around his waist, chest, arms, and legs. Foliage were snugly set in them, giving him a makeshift camouflage. He looked past Inlay and let out a toothy white grin at Jetta. Inlay slowly shook his head. Pay no mind to the girl. I, Inlay Ebonpath, shall be entertaining you tonight. Inlay made a gracious bow, as if he were back in the circus once more, entertaining a crowded audience. Kier winked at Jetta and spat. Let me deal with this clown. Don't go anywhere. Inlay smirked. Heh, clown. Inlay dashed headlong, pulling out a dagger and sending it soaring in front of him whilst wielding his sword in his other hand. Kier quickly equipped a cat claw, deflecting the thrown dagger before clashing with the blade. Inlay parried a slash, spinning around with a slick roundhouse kick that slammed into Kier's jaw. Kier twisted in the air before slamming into the ground. Rolling to his side, Kier nearly missed a diving impalement that instead struck the firm ground. Kier leapt backwards, landing in a standing position. You move fast, clown, but I see the night has slowed you down. Inlay was breathing heavily. He did not recover during the little rest he had. He needed to finish this fast. Kier had a point. If they continued this battle much longer, it would not end on equal footing. Kier unleashed a flurry of shuriken as Inlay ran toward him. Inlay, made his best to avoid the attack with a skillful attempt at deflecting them, but to no avail. Stumbling, he crashed to the ground as a series of shuriken lodged in a tall arc across his chest. He struggled to rise to a knee, breathing heavily as the iron stars sent furious tremors of pain scrambling through his body with each breath. Kier laughed. Not everyone is cut out for this life, clown. Inlay made an effort to stand, wobbling under the pain, exhaustion, and labored breathing. Kier took out another shuriken. You want another go? Fine with me. Inlay mustered the last of his energy and once again sprinted sword first at Kier. Concentrating on the shuriken path, Inlay lowered his back and neck, deflecting the stars with his armored mask. Kier gasped at the surprise deflection as Inlay drove his blade deep through his stomach, driving him backwards and pinning him to a tree. I guess you weren't cut out for this life, Inlay said faintly as he collapsed against the tree just beneath the impaled body, chuckling to himself. Inlay! Jetta screamed as she scrambled to his side. Alana was with you tonight, she said, attempting to keep Inlay in good spirits as she worked to remove the countless shurikens buried deep in his chest as painlessly as possible. Lucky me, Inlay said, taking off his mask and giving a wry smile. They smiled at one another and rested beneath Kier's corpse until they were ready to exit the blood forest through the clearing ahead. Chapter 25. Quickly, Inlay, don't lose him. Ellicard dashed past a series of thugs, his blade slicing through the legs of the men that stood between him and his mark. Easier said than done, master. These men are as big as bears. Inlay leapfrogged over the goon in front of him and released several daggers that sank deep into the back and shoulders of the next man blocking his path. In the distance, Inlay could see the Weasley man that was their mark run down the corridor of a dimly lit safe house. Bears? Huh? I bet they're just as hairy, too, chided Jetta, as she kept pace with Ellicard, nimbly flipping over and sidestepping countless guards. It had been a year or so since the Blood Forest, and Jetta had made large strides in her role as a veiled mender. She kept up with Inlay and Ellicard. The three had excellent chemistry as a team. A heavy wooden chamber door crashed open as Ellicard ran in, sword at the ready. Jetta followed with Inlay tagging just behind. A small, thin man huddled in the far corner, breathing heavily and sweating profusely. He shivered as he sputtered, Listen, I can get money. I just need a bit more time. I swear. It's all tied up in my various shops. I swear to Father that I'm good for it. Inlay balanced a dagger on the tip of his finger before tossing it and snatching it in midair. You pray to the wrong god, my friend. Ellicard slipped his sword's edge under the frightened man's chin. You failed to pay for our clan's protection? We are tired of your excuses. Now it's time you pay with your life. The man dropped to his knees. Please, His pleas were cut short by a quick swipe across his neck with Ellicard's blade. Inlay drooped his ears in dismay. Master, you killed the last one. This was my turn. No doubt you had your share from all those hired muscle I skipped. Jetta scowled, folding her arms. We shouldn't revel in taking lives even though we must. This isn't a game. We don't kill for sport. You're right, Jetta, nodded Ellicard. Let's head out. Inlay rolled his eyes beneath his mask, clearly annoyed. You're just the medic. You don't even carry a weapon. Who are you to talk down to me about taking lives? Jetta snapped her head back to Inlay. Excuse me? Jetta walked up to Inlay and thrust an index finger into his chest. I may just be the medic, but I am just as much an accomplice in these murders as both of you. Murders? That implies we've committed a crime. Jetta, you still don't understand the work we do, even a year after you've become a rabbit? Snarled Inlay. He moved dangerously close to Jetta, lowering his masked face to meet hers. Jetta shoved him back. I do what's asked of me. I keep you alive, nothing more than that. Inlay took out a dagger and thinly grazed the side of her face with its point. Dear Jetta, perhaps Alu fogs your mind. Distance yourself from our family, and you also become lost in that fog. Helune sik mereth judeo shisada alana, Jetta spat. What was that? Inlay said, his voice now raised. Hope is my beacon in death's shadow, Ellicard said with disappointment in his voice. He stepped in between Inlay and Jeddah and raised a hand to mediate between the two. Inlay, that's enough. Ellicard turned to Jeddah. Relax, Jeddah. Every now and again, it's good to let out a bit of steam. Our work no doubt hangs heavy in our souls. Jeddah nodded and bowed to her friend. Ellicard, you're right. I didn't mean to. It's all right, Jeddah. No harm done. Ellicard shot a glance at Inlay. Inlay? Inlay bowed his head. Forgive me, master. I was out of line. As well with you, Jeddah. Inlay's voice seemed a bit sharper as he spoke Jeddah's name. Ellicard returned the bow in respect to his student. It's fine. Our team functions best when we are all in accordance with one another. We're going to have our differences, but we need to leave them aside when it is time to get a task done. Master Legion speaks highly of our teamwork. Let's continue to earn that praise. The Black Rabbit compound was widespread with commotion as both recruits and assassins gathered in front of Highblade Legion. He raised his hand to simmer down the whisper. The rumors are true. We have been given a task larger and more important than any mission this clan has ever been given before. Immediately, the whisper started back up. Theories of what the mission could be spread like wildfire. Voices began to call out to Legion to lay the clan's curiosity to rest. We've been given the task to assassinate King Jalen during the Lost Dawn completion ball. A sweep of silence fell over the crowd as Legion gave the announcement. Malady stood in the back, leaning against a pillar. He found this announcement more interesting than most. To him, it was a clear chance to finally prove that his students were the most finely skilled assassins in the clan. However, the past failures of his pupils to defeat Legion students was a foul taste that lingered in his mouth. Nevertheless, this was his chance to gain the Silent Master's favor and perhaps become First Blade, a position that was still vacant with Veda's absence. And most importantly, leave him in a strategic spot to someday become High Blade. Malady's voice broke through the utterly flabbergasted crowd. And who, dear Blade Brother, shall be the lucky rabbit to fell a king? He continued before Legion could answer back. May I suggest my apprentice, Tesha? She is a cut above the rest, and has proved to be both equally precise as she is lethal. Before Legion could consider the suggestion, the rice paper door slid open behind him. A collective gasp resonated amongst everyone in the retreat. The Silent Master had made a rare appearance. Legion immediately collapsed to his knees, bewildered by the clan master's presence. The Silent Master gazed at his subjects, as they all quickly fell to their knees. Most had never seen the man who commanded the High Blade. He was an elf, like the most of his rabbits. Unlike most elves, he had large, impending muscles that brimmed his body. He had a shaved head that was nearly bald, although short silver hair could still be seen. His eyes were black, with a slight edge of near-white irises hugging his pupils. Decorative tattoos covered his arms and half of his face, which was accented with a thin scar crossed diagonally over his lips. He was robed in black and violet silks. A pair of short swords were sheathed on either side of a red sash around his waist. The Silent Master held quiet briefly before speaking. The first attempt on Jalen's life was a failure. I was betrayed by my own tribe. However, I have since forsaken those traitorous fools. This clan is my tribe now. You are all my family. He paused for a moment and gazed out at the crowd. I have taken some time to deliberate who should carry the weight of this mission on their shoulders. One who has shown promise over these years. One who was trained by our most skilled. Most of all, one who I can trust. The Silent Master motioned his finger. Ellicard, come forth. Ellicard's eyes widened with disbelief. Inlay patted him on the back and whispered for him to hurry. The Silent Master continued as the young elf hustled forward. Ellicard, each test we've given you was performed with prowess and finesse. You've proven to be a student of our ways and philosophies.
You've grown from the whelp you once were to the assassin you are today. You and your team of 2 others shall travel swiftly and silently to the god-forsaken city of Lost Dawns. You shall carry out your duty to slay Jalen, and thereby cement your own legacy. When you return victorious, you will take your place alongside your former teacher, Legion, as my first blade.
Alucard was stunned.
What say you?
Alucard looked back to Inlay and Jeddah, and then smiled as he bowed before the Silent Master. May Alana coat my blade with the same honor you bestow upon me. Like a shadow, my team will descend upon our enemies and drown them in their own blood. The Silent Master smiled thinly.
Very well, Alucard. Reap the night.
Chapter 26. A dull blade smashed against a heavy iron buckler. Wicker danced backwards as Avon recoiled from the block and struck out with an attack of his own. The training sword deftly sliced through the air, but missed its mark. No longer forced to reside within walls of the rundown temple, the Long Whisper division of White Cloaks now had a barracks and a headquarters built within the newly formed military district of Lost Dawns. There, a training ground was built in a lot outside the barracks, and was a common place to find Wicker and Avon in the early hours of the rising sun. You're getting better every day, little brother. Wicker smiled. Better than you, he said as he spun around, slashing at Avon. Avon caught the blade with his own sword, and with the twist of his wrist, sent Wicker's sword flying out of his hand. Not quite, he laughed. Wicker walked over to his sword, sulking before getting back into a defensive stance in preparation for another round. How's your girlfriend doing? No doubt she's been bored held up in the city. I imagine she wants to get back to her clan so she can stab us in the back. Avon smirked, thinking about Elisa's new hobby of trying on pretty dresses to impress him. Afterward, she would steal the one she liked. It was true that Elisa was not meant to be a caged bird, but the opportunity to use her in the field had not quite presented itself. Avon suggested that she had become part of the guard, and each time he brought it up, she would laugh in his face. White doesn't suit me, she would say, and Avon did his best to convince her otherwise. The White Cloaks had learned just about all they could from Elisa, and he knew that she needed to continue to prove herself useful, or she would quickly find herself back in a cell. Although she might prove of some use if she were to go back to her clan, Wicker said as he ducked under a quick attack. How so? Avon deflected a brutal slash with his shield. What we need are a well-trained set of eyes and ears on the rabbits. If Elisa is too afraid to tell us where their compound is, the next best thing is for her to be a spy in their little rabbit hole. Avon nodded before crashing his shield into Wicker's chest, bowling him over. I'll run it by her. Could be more danger than she's up for. You're really starting to care for her, Wicker laughed, making a hugging motion with his hands and puckering his face. Hey, we're just mutual partners. It's purely business. Business and sex, Wicker snickered, picking himself up off the ground. Avon smacked him on the back of his head. Enough out of you. Hand me that water skin. Avon took a long drink and wiped the water from his mouth with the back of his sleeve. Speaking of business, we have an order from the king. Wicker sat and rubbed the back of his head. The city is buzzing all about the ball that is coming up. Is that what the order is about? Avon nodded, passing him a scroll. According to Elisa, the roots are buzzing too. No doubt word will get out to the rabbits. The king is throwing a ball to celebrate the city's completion. Jalen wants us to provide security, and he wants us to personally be at his side. That's a big honor. The rabbits wouldn't risk such an appearance with that much security. It would be foolish. A chance we can't take. Best to be prepared all the same. The ball is 3 days from now, so get your finest tunic pressed and use your celebratory saber. This could be a night to remember. Chapter 27.
Alucard, I urge you to reconsider your team. Allow my apprentice Tesha and I to accompany you instead. We both have more skill and experience between the two of us than your whole team. You would regret not taking us.
Malady repeated over and over to Ellicard in an effort to snake his way into the mission of a lifetime. Sorry, my mind is made up. The Silent Master must see great potential in me, and I must trust my own judgment. I'd be daft not to. Ellicard turned to leave and signaled Jeddah and Inlay to follow him. At the last second, Malady pulled Inlay to the side. You and I both know you should be First Blade. Ellicard has skill, yes, but I've watched you, Inlay. No one has the drive quite like you. Even my apprentice admits you belong under my tutelage. Now, I can't take you under my wing for training, but I can take you under my wing to make sure you truly grow. Ellicard is going to take all the glory away from those that truly shined. Inlay smiled wickedly. You flatter me, sir. You wish to see me grow, but to what end? Where do you benefit? I do not directly benefit. You becoming the rightful First Blade is benefit enough. I can make this happen. Are you interested? Inlay looked back to Ellicard before giving his answer. I have to admit, I am a bit interested. Just make sure Ellicard does not return alive. That is it. Things can happen in the heat of battle. Accidents happen all the time. Enemies can get the upper hand. Understand? Inlay stared fiercely at Malady. Afraid I don't. In fact, I think it would be best if you just walked away, or else I'll make sure an accident happens to you. Do we understand one another? Perfectly. Malady smiled and chuckled through his teeth before he walked away. Kneeling in the shade of the blood forest, the silence enveloped Malady like a pair of shadowy wings. He locked himself within the depths of thought. Memories of his youth crashed through his mind like the rapids of a river. He slowly stood, reaching for 2 of his 5 swords fanned across his back. Unsheathing them, he coolly went through the motions of a meditative kata. Flowing through the different combative stances, he imagined his enemies were in front of him. The image of Legion. The image of Ellicard. Finally, the image of Leandra. In slick, fluid motions, he swiped at the illusion skillfully, killing his targets one by one, until they were gone. You held me back, he shouted, calling out to no one but himself. You were only ever in my way. Master, who are you talking to? Tesha asked as she slid from the shadows behind Malady. She was an elf from a similar fishing village to Ravenshore. She was dressed in the traditional black and purple clothing of the Black Rabbits. Her long red hair matched the scarf that coiled around her neck and made her stand out among the rest of the clan, as did the small butterfly tattoo on her wrist. Malady sheathed his blade, still furious from his own thoughts. His face was covered in pure anguish, but he slid it back to his normal, more calculated demeanor. Taking a deep breath, he turned on his heel to approach his apprentice. Were you followed? Of course not. You take me for an amateur. Tesha seeded a smile. So, what is your plan? Are we going to steal the kill from Ellicard, his apprentice, and that Mender bitch? Malady tossed his fingertips together as he brought them up to his lips. His plan was the very definition of insane. Tesha tapped her foot impatiently. Well, spit it out already. You are to go to the king, but instead of killing him, you will warn him of the coming attack and will help him kill Ellicard and his comrades. Malady shined a toothy smile. But master, that's treason. Tesha could not even begin to fathom what must have driven her master to such madness. It's justified treason, roared Malady. His smile vanished in a flash. I should be High Blade. You should have been given the opportunity to become First Blade. All this clan has ever done is humiliate me. Malady panted in frustration before continuing. You are still young, Tesha. Have I told you about my last high apprentice, a young boy about your age named Keth? Deep within the very forest where we stand, Ellicard relieved my dear Keth of his head. Keth was much stronger than you are, but you show boundless cunning. You have what it takes to succeed where Keth failed, I know it. The clan does not want me to thrive, it never did. And now it will not let you flourish. You have seen how everyone brushes you off. You have seen how the clan praises Ellicard and Legion for even the most minuscule of victories. Tesha was silent. She always praised him. I worked harder than him, than all of them. Malady paced back and forth, his hand waving in the air. Master, Tesha was lost in Malady's ramblings. Malady gritted his teeth, collecting himself. My dear Tesha, you and I will no doubt become High Blade and First Blade of Legion, and Ellicard are taken out of the picture. However, first you need to leave at sunbreak for Lost Dawns, reach the king and tell him the danger he is in, then help him fend off and kill Ellicard, Inlay, and Jeddah. The city will raise you up as a hero. We will, no doubt, earn an alliance with the king to do tasks the rabbits had no access to before. Legion will be crushed that his beloved prodigy has fallen in the line of duty. He will step down to wallow in his misery. Good fortune will finally shine down on us. Life will be grand. Tesha grinned, imagining herself as the hero of Lost Dawns and the first blade of the Black Rabbits, but quickly questioned Malady's plan. But master, if I betray the Silent Master, why would he make me first blade? The clan will be aligned with Lost Dawns. If that old fool of a Silent Master cannot see the rewards in that, I will see to it that he steps down. We must think outside the box. They have pushed us to this road. Now, child, leave at once. She bowed before him. I shall do this for you. Malady bowed back. For us. Lost Dawns was a sight to see from where the three stood atop the clock tower. The elder trees stood a force of pure beauty in the center of the city. Buildings dotted the landscape all around the mighty tree. Ellicard and Jeddah were stunned by the sheer size of it all. In the distance, the Dawn Edge Castle watched over the slumbering city. The moonlight cascaded over the three rabbits as they sat on the ledge of their looming tower. We move in 3 hours. Inlay, scout the castle perimeter and get us a count of white cloaks, said Ellicard. Inlay bowed before dropping into the night. Jeddah folded her legs, adjusting her position on the ledge. Long ago, she was afraid of climbing too high on the old willow tree back in Ravenshore. Now, she was sitting on the edge of an enormous clock tower. She looked over at Ellicard. He had changed as well. No longer was he the peaceful young elf boy. He was once curious and kind, but now he was a ruthless killer. Perhaps that boy was still in him, trapped as a prisoner of his new rabbit soul. Maybe it wasn't too late for him to rejoin the living, instead of being a slave to the damned. Ellicard, she whispered, do you ever think of what could have become if you weren't taken by the Black Rabbits? Jeddah, you must stay focused. This isn't some slumlord or lesser baron we're going to kill. This is the king of all Long Whisper. She was silent. Did he not grasp what he just said? Ellicard. Her voice was higher now. We don't have to do this. This is terrorism. Please, tell me that somewhere inside of you a shred of humanity still exists, that you haven't let the little boy you once were succumb to the killer you are now. Ellicard stopped himself short. Humanity. Legion once had told him to save the humanity in him, that it would be an edge against enemies. He had forgotten that. He had lost all humanity until only a husk of himself existed. He needed to sever that tie to survive. But did he survive? He was alive, but he felt nothing now. Emotionless, cold, empty. Jeddah, now isn't the time for this. I need you to focus and act like the rabbit we've trained you to be. The moment we stumble is the moment we will fail. Ellicard, I know the good in you is still there. I know the rabbits haven't turned your soul into complete darkness. The moment we assassinate Jalen, well, that's something we can never turn back from. Do you understand that we'll have to live with such a deed over our heads for the rest of our lives? Such a deed? Jeddah, listen to yourself. Have you learned nothing? We do what must be done. It is a divine duty to kill for Alana. I can't believe I have to debate this with you. Jeddah reached out for Ellicard. Alana is a neutral goddess. She doesn't wish for us to go around killing people. She is a goddess of nature. The rabbits have twisted everything, including the will of the fates. Even I can see that, Ellicard. Why can't you? Ellicard jerked backwards in complete disbelief of Jeddah. Ellicard, please see reason. You can't possibly believe what we are about to do is justified. We kill the innocent. We make widows and we make orphans. Look into your heart and see what you've become. Ellicard was blanketed with anger and confusion. How could Jeddah be saying this, especially now? He thought she understood the cause, that she believed it. Jeddah, I thought you were with me. We are a team. You, Inlay, and I, a team. Ellicard, I will always be by your side. But I just wish you would understand that the rabbits are poisoning you, Jetta said tenderly. She now saw a lost little boy looking back at her on the ledge of that clock tower. The black rabbits have poisoned you. Myler's words echoed in his head. Flashes of him slaughtering his friends scattered across his mind. Jetta, you don't know what I'm capable of, what the rabbits are capable of. The things I've done could never be forgiven. What we're about to do, I can't protect you from the path we're about to embark on. You need to go, now. Run far away from me, the rabbits, all of it, until you are safe. Jetta shook her head, furrowing her brow in sadness. Ellicard, I see that you want to protect me from the life we lead. But when we separated for that first time, it cracked us in two. Together we are strong. I want you to be strong, Ellicard. I want to be strong with you. Ellicard embraced his friend, a tear rolling down his eye. Jetta, I promise to keep you safe, but I don't know how long I can do that. Ellicard, I've grown up. I want to be the one to keep you safe. Ellicard smiled meekly, breaking from the hug. Still keeping a hand on hers, he whispered, We'll protect each other, then. Ellicard! Inlay sharply broke the moment, like lightning breaking from the sky. Ellicard stood and bowed to his student, the side of his eyes wet from the tears. Inlay took notice, darting his attention to Jetta and scowling under his mask. Ellicard, there were 9 guards covering the wall, only 4 around the castle roof. I found a balcony that is unguarded, an excellent place to slip in. Inlay said, hoping to have Ellicard snap back to his attentive state. Ellicard nodded. We'll leave. We should leave now, Inlay said, cutting off his master. He spoke again, still eyeing Jetta. Before more guards accumulate. Ellicard patted his student on the shoulder. Good job, Inlay. He stole a glance at Jetta. A new feeling was emerging from him that lay dormant in his mind for so long. Joy. Not the joy from a kill or the joy from satisfying his peers and master. This was a different type of joy, a hopeful one. He could not pinpoint it, but it felt like his childhood. Inlay watched his master's eyes seem to wander off into his thoughts. Inlay needed to take control of the situation. Whatever Jetta had said needed to be undone. He needed his master's head to be in the game. A blade is only as sharp as the rabbit wielding it. You need to clear your head. There's a lot of madness in this mission. We are here to do what no one could do before. Kill the king. You're not doing this alone, though. You have me. You have Jetta. We are the team that the Silent Master handpicked. Master, we are it. The true elite. We have your back. The clan has your back. It is time we rabbits do what we were trained to do. Purge a life. And rebalance the scales. Ellicard looked through the thin eye slits of Inlay's mask. Yes, Inlay. You speak the truth. He turned to Jetta, putting a hand on both her and Inlay's shoulders. We are the true elite. We need to prove to not only our clan, but ourselves that we can perform the most daunting task of our life. Whether we succeed or fail, this will be a trial that all will speak of for the rest of history. Ellicard took out his blade and nodded to the 2 teammates. Inlay smiled, taking out his blade. We are with you, Master. Jetta lowered her head, still in doubt of the cause, but complied all the same. Until the end, Ellicard. Ellicard pointed his blade at the castle. May Alana guide our blades! Ellicard roared as he dropped down toward the castle. Once Ellicard was out of sight, Inlay grabbed Jetta's arm. I do not know what you have said that shook him up like that, but you need to stop playing your little game with Ellicard's head. He needs to be at 100% to complete this mission, and if he is second-guessing himself. Relax, Inlay, let me go. We have work to do, Jetta said, yanking her arm away. Don't be distracted by me. Ellicard isn't the only one of us that needs to be at 100% to walk out of this alive. Have you forgotten? We're about to kill a king. Jetta sneered, disgusted by her own words. Fury washed over Inlay's face beneath his mask. I'm watching you, Jetta. Chapter 28. Wicker leaned against the marble railing of the small balcony that overlooked the blooming city below. His pearl-white cloak swam in the cool evening air, and his thoughts scattered like the infinite sands of Scorch, unsteadily, listlessly, and utterly directionless. Then, at once, his thoughts violently washed over him, and there was nowhere he could run or hide to escape the coarse avalanche. "Wicker, get the king out of here!" Avern roared. His sword shimmered in the glaze of the daylight that seeped from the open window where Tesha had entered. She stood on the war table, unfazed by Avern's blade. A series of daggers whizzed into the floorboards, stopping Jalen and Wicker in their tracks. "I think it would be best that the king hears what I have to say," she said. She gave Wicker a thin smile as he moved himself in front of the Elven king. "If I wanted the king dead, I would have killed him when you two noble idiots weren't here." "What did you call?" started Avern. "We are losing valuable time here," Tesha interrupted. "Jalen, I'm here on a mission to protect you from my clan. As we speak, my clan has sent a squad of assassins to deal with you. As much as I hate to admit it, they are very skilled. Without my help, you may perish this night." Wicker cautiously moved his hand away from his blade's handle. "Why should we trust a rabbit, especially one working against its own clan?" Tesha flipped her hand through her wavy, vibrant red hair. Her amber elven eyes gazed into Wicker's. "An excellent question, my handsome white cloak. My clan is much like the sun. It nourishes one flower, while the rest wither in the shade." "What do you gain from your clan's failure?" Wicker asked, still unconvinced. "I would have saved the king's life. No doubt I would have gained enough trust to build the foundation of a relationship between our people. Exclusive contracts, perhaps. After all, don't we all wish to be praised as a hero?" "I would indeed hail you as a hero for turning against your clan to protect me. We shall set a trap for these villains. With my white cloaks aligned with the black rabbits, they will stand no chance." Jalen brandished a wide smile and clapped his hands. "I want to be present for this." "Absolutely not." Avern gestured his hand in a motion to display that he completely disagreed with the entire situation. "It's not your call. You may lead your cloaks, but I hired them. You take commands from me. This isn't the first time someone has tried to kill me, and I'm sure it will not be the last." The king turned to Tesha. "You, Rabbit, who is coming to assassinate me?" "Ellicard leads two. Inlay, his student, and a medic known as Jetta." Jalen scrunched his face in disgust. "This Ellicard and his team will hang from broken necks in the town square tomorrow. I will personally see to it." "Your Grace, I highly advise against this plan. If this Ellicard intends to kill you, why should we give him so much as an opportunity?" Avern said, this time remembering his courtesies. "Captain, I do not fear what goes bump in the night. For when it does, I bump back." Wicker anxiously thumbed the edge of his blade. "So, Ellicard, my honorable deed will haunt me." He resolved then and there he would not spare him a second time. "What troubles you, Sergeant?" The quiet but kind voice broke up his thoughts. Wicker turned and found himself looking at an elf, roughly his age. He was clothed in fine nobleman threads. A circlet about his forehead and a dawn-edged signet ring marked him as royalty. By his side stood a large wolf that had brilliant cobalt fur and an eye that sparked wild with magic. It nudged at the elf's hand. Wicker knelt in the presence of the Prince of Long Whisper. "Prince Koda, I was only thinking." Koda chuckled. "Yes, I can see that. What about?" "Yes, a dumb response. I was thinking about tonight and my responsibilities, my future, everything, I suppose." "Ah, I see. Everything often gets cluttered in one's mind." Koda knelt down to playfully run his hand through the thick fur of his familiar. Wild Eye hefted her giant paws onto Koda's shoulders and licked him mercilessly. "It helps to have a friend that can clear out that mess in your head." Wicker leaned on the railing and looked towards the horizon. The sun was setting, and crimson and purple clouds covered its retreat. "I have the stress of protecting an entire city, commanding men, battling for my life. You have it easy. You share little responsibilities with your father. I can't just have a dog lick me and have it all be better." Coda's face went stiff. Forgive me, my prince, Wicker bowed, baffled by his poor choice of words. Coda waved him off. My friend, it is true that we have different worries and duties, but no matter which boots we walk in, which roads we are led down, we must always keep an open mind. An open mind is a clear mind. A clear mind is a sharp mind. A sharp mind, that is a weapon you must favor. Nevertheless, have a good night, my friend. Think well on what I have said here tonight. Coda walked away with Wild Eyes softly patting at his side as Avrin and Elisa stepped out onto the balcony. Avrin would have to be getting ready soon. Has she decided to help us spy on her clan? As of now, things are too heated. I can't risk going back to the compound. I learned from my contacts that both the High Blade and the First Blade are missing, Elisa said, slightly anxious with the mood of the night. The High Blade and First Blade. So, Avalon and Veda, as you called them, how are they missing? Wicker asked, a bit annoyed by Elisa's lack of cooperation. Avalon left the clan, and Veda was tasked with hunting her down. You are given a death sentence for leaving the clan. You see why I can't go back, Elisa continued. All I see is a rabbit losing its usefulness, Wicker sneered. Elisa looked earnestly toward Avrin, who scowled at his brother. Wicker, enough. Elisa brings news of who this Tesha might be, and whether she can be trusted. Well, Wicker said, tapping a nervous foot. According to my contacts, Tesha is the new apprentice of Malady. His previous apprentice was killed by Elicard. Overall, I know very little of this Tesha. Malady, however, I know. He's a cunning man, a snake in the grass. He cannot be trusted. But in this case, he works for your advantage. But do not forget, he works only toward his own ends. So this isn't a trap? Avrin asked. No, I don't believe so. This is some sort of revenge against Elicard at the very least. At the very most, it is a power play against his own clan, Elisa finished. Nice work, Elisa. Wicca, let's head out and get ready for our guests, Avrin said, nodding approvingly at Elisa. The moon was a sliver in the night, partially shrouded by navy blue clouds. The air was laden with a thick scent of rain. Inlay led Jeddah and Elicard past the guards and to a small marble balcony. The trio slipped in smoothly. It's all so quiet, Jeddah whispered. There should be guests arriving and music playing. The ball is tonight, isn't it? Inlay checked a pair of double doors before scanning the stairs leading downwards. No servants either. Let's check the throne room. Perhaps the king is awaiting guests there, Elicard said, beckoning his team to follow. Elicard deftly navigated through the rafters. Slipping between the large wooden doors, Inlay and Jeddah followed suit. The team dropped down into the shadows of two large adjacent pillars. King Jalen sat patiently on his throne. Elicard slowly retrieved a small throwing knife from his belt. Taking aim at the king's throat, he let it loose. To the shock of the three, Tesha dropped from the shadows of the rafters, deflecting the steel dagger with a throwing knife of her own. Elicard's projectile redirected and lodged into the pillar inches from his head. Immediately, the thundering sound of marching boots flooded into the throne room, and an army of white cloaks surrounded the rabbits. Wicker and Avrin entered from parallel doors and walked to either side of the king. Tesha waltzed, shrugging toward the stunned Elicard. A pity it turned out this way, Elicard. I admit, you are kind of cute. She gently brushed a finger down his black leather armor. Tesha, you traitorous bitch, he furiously whispered. Now, Elicard, doesn't it feel awful to have everything you worked for just stripped away from you? Elicard seethed with anger as he clenched his teeth and balled his fists. You now know how my master Malady has felt for years. But don't worry, Elicard. You won't feel this way for nearly as long. Tesha continued as she walked back to the throne, taking a seat on one of its arms and crossing her legs. Master, what are your orders? Inlay whispered. His hands nervously shook. Elicard, we have to get out of here. Abandon this mission and get going while we're still able to, Jeddah pleaded. No. We have a mission and we're getting it done. Inlay, You and I will deal with these lesser cloaks. I have a feeling the real challenge will be with those officers next to Jalen. Jeddah, stay back. Join the fray only if you have no other choice. Inlay grinned wickedly under his mask. Jeddah nodded and backed into a corner, her hand hovering slightly over her haversack. Jalen, silent until now, lifted a single hand.
Arrest them!
Several white cloaks rushed headlong toward Ellicard and Inlay, who hand sprung backwards before leaping forward in perfect unison, as only a teacher and student would. They made quick work of their opponents, exerting as little effort as possible by targeting vital spots with lethal precision. In mere minutes, the last white cloak fell slain at the feet of the two assassins. Ellicard's brow still furrowed from the betrayal. Inlay, the king is the primary target, but do not let your guard down. I recognize one of these men. He is strong. No doubt his captain will be stronger. Wicker approached, sword in hand. Ah, so you remember me, Ellicard. Have you mentioned to your friend here how I left you for dead in a ravine? Ellicard moved to meet Wicker. That was some time ago. Ellicard swung his blade, clashing against the steel of Wicker's steel. You'll find it much more difficult to best me a second time. Inlay smirked and dashed for Averin. However, his opponent was ready and rammed his shoulder into Inlay's chest. Inlay skidded and tumbled backward. Jeddah ran to Inlay's side, but he pushed her away. I'm fine. Get back to cover. Jeddah quickly retreated back to the shadows, furious. Averin lunged into the air, bringing down his sword with a heavy swing. Inlay sprung and quickly parried, swinging back around and viciously slashing at Averin's side. Grunting, Averin kicked Inlay into a neighboring pillar, dazing him. Averin followed through, thrusting his blade into Inlay's shoulder. Inlay roared in pain. Jeddah! Inlay kicked Averin backward, tearing the blade out of his body. He collapsed into Jeddah's arms. You're going to have to make this quick, Jeddah. Averin began to gather himself for another attack. Jeddah quickly examined the deep wound. She took out a patch of cloth that glowed bright red and placed it on top of the wound. She pressed down hard, then ripped off the cloth, revealing a freshly cauterized wound. Inlay groaned in complete pain. Sorry, Inlay. I know blister cloth hurts like hell. Blister cloth was aptly named. Inlay's wound had blistered and scarred, but he would be able to tenderly rotate his shoulder again. Nodding to the medic, Inlay leaped at Averin and landed a swift kick to his chest. Averin slid back and followed through with a heavy swing, but he was met with a clash of steel. Both men matched attacks with skillful parries. Inlay sent a stream of twirling daggers at Averin, some of which lodged into his arm and shoulder. Averin charged, grabbing Inlay's collar, and bashed him repeatedly in the face with the guard of his sword. Luckily for Inlay, his mask took the brunt of the strikes, but he felt the concussive blows all the same. Inlay dropped to the floor, completely dazed. Meanwhile, Wicker led with a flurry of swings, leaving Ellicard to duck, tumble, and dodge the relentless attacks. Circling around, Ellicard jumped for an abrasive counter of his own, sneaking a slash into Wicker's torso. Inspecting the wound, Wicker found it was not fatal, and he rushed in close, elbowing the assassin under the jaw. Ellicard grimaced, and Wicker grabbed the elf's arm and ruthlessly kicked at his chest. There was a gruesome popping sound as Ellicard's right arm went limp. Ellicard swiftly switched his sword into his left hand, just barely making an awkward parry from a deadly thrust. Ellicard's face twisted as Wicker backhanded him with an armored fist. Blood spewed from his mouth as he collided with the ground. Ellicard clenched his teeth in pain as he struggled to stand. Stealing a glance at Wicker's attempt at a savage kick to the ribs, Ellicard held his breath as Jeddah leaped over him to land a drop kick, blowing back Wicker. Jeddah turned. Keep still, she commanded. Ellicard did as he was told, but arched his back in agony as Jeddah pushed his dislodged shoulder back into place. Ah, Jeddah! Are you sure you aren't doing more harm than good? Ellicard teased, still wincing as he stretched his arm, gingerly testing the shoulder. No, I have no clue how you're supposed to be the new First Blade, she joked. Wicker held his broken nose from the surprise kick as he recovered his blade. You still lack the necessary skills to beat me. Then perhaps I'll quit holding back, said Ellicard as he juked and slid behind Wicker. Seizing the opportunity, Ellicard drove his blade into the back of Wicker's thigh, dropping him to the ground. While Wicker was screaming in agony, Ellicard grabbed the tuft of his hair and whispered in his ear, You spared me. I suppose it is only right that I return the favor. Ellicard slammed the cloak's head into the ground, knocking him out cold. Inlay was faring better as well, spinning to avoid another thrust to his injured shoulder. Inlay backed into Avron, following up with a hand chop to Avron's throat. Avron went down hard, choking and gasping for air. Inlay took the moment to run Avron through with his sword before kicking him onto his side. Turning his head, Inlay caught Jalen and Tesha escaping toward a side door. "Ellicard, the king!" Ellicard reached into his side pouch, grabbing a smoke pellet and breaking it between Tesha and Jalen. Tesha shoved Jalen to the side, sending him crashing through a nearby door. "Make haste. I'll deal with Ellicard." Tesha could barely see through the densely clouded room. She lifted her magenta scarf over her nose and mouth, trying desperately to hold in her coughs. Several shurikens darted through the smoke. Tesha managed to deflect 2 of them, but a third grazed her cheek. She launched an attack of her own, sending a fan of daggers flying through the smoke. She listened carefully and heard a grunt. She smirked and careened a kick in that direction. Ellicard allowed the strike to catch him in the chest, pushing him back as he grabbed Tesha by the ankle, swinging her into a wall. Taking advantage of the stunned Tesha, Ellicard thrust his sword into the traitor's gut. Tesha smiled as blood bubbled out of the corners of her mouth. With the last ounce of her strength, she palmed 2 daggers and drove them under Ellicard's ribs. "A parting gift from malady." Ellicard screamed, filled with rage, and twisted the handle of his blade savagely before tearing it out of her flesh. A gruesome flood of blood spilled onto the white floor. Jalen scrambled down the hall, calling for any help that he could find. Several shuriken found their mark on his back, and he fell into a messy heap on the marble floor. He sloppily moved to get back up. Running from the end of the hall, Coda and Tull rushed to Jalen's aid. "It's too late, Jalen," Ellicard said in a low, tired voice. He limped, holding his pain-stricken side with one hand. A freshly blood-soaked magenta scarf wrapped around his sword handle. The assassin mustered the last of his strength as he dashed, slicing the back of the Elven King's legs. Jalen fell to his knees. Ellicard's sword rested on Jalen's shoulder, tapping his neck gently. "Spare my son," Jalen said in a soft voice. Ellicard locked eyes with the fallen king, nodded, and swung his blade. The loud clanging of a crown hitting the ground filled the air. Ellicard lifted his eyes to find Coda standing only an arm's length away. Unfathomable sadness and fury filled the prince's face all at once. Ellicard lifted his blade at the prince, warning him to stay back. "Ellicard, we need to leave now," Jeddah shouted firmly. She grabbed his arm, tugging him away from Coda, who was utterly frozen in place. "Come on!" Ellicard turned to look at Jeddah. Her eyes begged him to feel something, anything. "Come on, you bastard, we have to go!" She continued to pull on him to no avail, and silence floated between the two for a moment that felt like an eternity. Ellicard's aching arm was still raised with his blade pointed at the grief-stricken Coda. Tull stood still, unable to make a move while his nephew was so close to danger. A minute, maybe more, passed. The ambience of the rain outside was the only sound that sunk through the moment. Ellicard, exhausted both physically and mentally from the turbulent night, managed a single soft word. "Sorry."